Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's my Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. I've now owned it for over half a year, put almost 9,000 miles on it. So today we're going to do a general update video on this platform to help you decide if it's worth buying one of the last 5th generation Toyota RAV4s, or if it's worth buying the 2026. The details, the specs, all of that came out on the new generation yesterday. And I have put together a pros and a cons list of the new generation, and after owning one of these for half a year, and driving a lot of the competition to this compact crossover, I have a lot of things that I want to share with you guys regarding my thoughts and opinions about the new generation, at least based off of what we know about it so far. And if you get anything out of this video today, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Are you going to buy one of the new generation RAV4s? Or would you rather pick up one of these if you don't already have one? I'd love to know. Whether it's new or used, there's a lot of ways you can buy your RAV4. And with that said, let's get right into it. So we're going to go through the pros of the new generation and then the cons of the new generation, but then at the end of this video, after I talk about how my ownership experience has been with this RAV4, then I'll share my final thoughts on if I'm considering buying the new one still, or if I'm actually going to hold on to this one maybe a little bit longer than originally planned. So some of the main pros about the new 6th generation, starting with Toyota Safety Sense 4.0, that I can only imagine is a huge upgrade, over 2.5 what these currently have. Honestly, these safety features are kind of on par with a lot of the other vehicles or subpar compared to some of them. For instance, when I came from a Subaru Outback Wilderness to this, the first day I had it, I could already tell how much worse these safety features were. Lane keep assist, lane tracing, all of that stuff, it just doesn't work nearly as well. It doesn't feel nearly as competent of a system. So I think 4.0 is probably and hopefully going to fix a lot of those problems. Additionally, it's kind of cool that you're going to get a heads-up display. And while, just like the safety features, not all heads-up displays are created equally, some of them are better than other ones, some of them work better, have better lighting, some of them are just more in-depth on the details that it shows on the screen. I am still pretty excited. I think that's going to be a pretty cool feature. Although I'm not sure if it's going to be only the upper trim levels or if you're even going to get that on the lower trim levels. But for the new generation, you're going to get a little bit more power. The base model front-wheel drive hybrids are going to get 226 horsepower, so about a 7 horsepower gain. And then the all-wheel drive models, like what mine is going to have a little bit more than that, 236. So about 17 horsepower more than my current example, which is pretty cool. And then the plug-in hybrid EV, what used to be called the Prime, that's going to be about 320 horsepower. But unfortunately, that means there's no gas-powered, ICE-power-only version of this that isn't electrified. So that's going to be discussed a little bit more on the cons list in just a moment. But these are going to be able to tow a little bit more, with the peak tow rating being up to 3,500 pounds. I would speculate that that is the plug-in hybrid, up from 2,500 pounds on the current generation. So that is cool, but honestly, I'm not sure that the new horsepower ratings are going to actually improve acceleration that much, because chances are the vehicle is going to weigh a little bit more than it currently does, because everything gets bigger over time, everything gets a little bit heavier, more safety features are involved. That's more weight to add to the vehicle, and the additional horsepower is probably only going to compensate for that, is my speculation. But these are supposed to have a tiny bit more passenger room for the front, not the back, but the front, and that's pretty cool, because it can sometimes feel a little bit cramped up in the front, especially if the back seats are full. And subjectively, I do think the new generation of RAV4 actually looks pretty good. Toyota really has to play it safe. They don't want to make such a drastic change that they lose a lot of their customer base. People like what they like, and the RAV4 is obviously a home run if they sell 1 million units globally every single year, or almost 500,000 just in the United States last year. And I don't think they really changed the visual appearance of it, at least from the exterior, that much. The side profile looks almost identical. The front fascia and the rear definitely do look a lot different, very much refreshed for the new generation. But if this is going to be now the RAV4 that's around until 2030 or 2031 or 2, I do think it actually looks pretty darn decent. But unfortunately, there are a few issues or a few cons that I have with this new platform. The biggest one is the starting price. It's probably going to be $3,000 to $5,000 more than the starting price of the 2025 model year. Most of that is going to be due to the fact that there is no longer just a gas, ICE-powered 2.5 liter engine. If they really are all hybrids, kind of like what Toyota did with the Camry, that is going to raise the price, and that is going to lose a little bit of their customer base. Not everyone is ready for electrification. Not everyone can afford the extra several $1,000s. So I do think that that is a very disappointing thing that Toyota decided to do. But we'll see how it turns out overall, and maybe they'll surprise us with the pricing. The second thing is, I don't think that the windows are any bigger on the new generation. These windows are decent, visibility is okay, but the RAV4 is not class leading for visibility. The Forester is. The Mazda's probably one of the worst. The RAV4 is somewhere in the middle. I also kind of speculate that because everything on the side profile looks very similar, I kind of doubt they opened the doors on the hinges any bigger than they currently are, which that might look decent on camera, but when you come around to this angle, looking straight on at it, you can see the doors like a 45-degree angle. It really doesn't open up nearly as much as a lot of other vehicles. So hopefully the interior is still cheap and durable enough to absorb a lot of hits and a lot of damage, which I've honestly kind of stopped caring about the door panels on mine in the back, which it is all black, cheap plastic. Even on my like $38,000 example, those are the exact same door panels as the base model LE, which is like 10 grand less than this, but they just don't open nearly as wide as other vehicles. And then the back seat area is not nearly as big as some of the other compact crossovers. Again, mostly the Subaru Forester because that is kind of the class leading one. And then if we come to the interior, the other thing that I am a little bit disappointed with, the screen is changing for the new generation. It is going to be bigger, and from what I can see online, it does seem like it's basically the same version of this, maybe newer software and a larger display, and I've never had mine glitch out or cause any problems. But I don't necessarily like that we're losing the physical climate controls and they're being put into the screen. And honestly, these ones are not completely physical or mechanical. They are software controlled. That's why you can turn them forever. That's why you can push the buttons forever. There's not like a set point. It controls the software, but it is nice to have the physical buttons to do that so that everything isn't tied up in the screen and you're not having to look at the big screen versus just having some muscle memory to remember how to dial, how to push, which button over it is. So I don't think that's going to be a huge knock on the new generation, but it is certainly a small one. I'd rather have this little bit than that much more screen, because screens do go out of date, and ultimately in 10-20 years when a RAV4 is still around and has, a couple 100,000 miles, the screen's going to seem ancient, I'm assuming, because that's what cars from 15 years ago with a screen seem like today. But back to my RAV4 and a few reasons why I bought this and why I still really like it, despite the fact that it's not the perfect vehicle, because such a thing does not exist. Every vehicle, every platform, every powertrain, they all have their flaws. You just have to decide what matters the most to you and what you can live with. And overall, the RAV4 is something that for right now I can still live with. But when I bought this, I bought it partially because I no longer have a project car. In the past, like when I had my Outback Wilderness, I had a Trans Am. I also had a Mazda Miata. I had a few other cars so that if something happened to one of those cars, I still have a backup. And there were times where I would drive those cars and my Outback would sit for weeks at a time. But right now, I don't have any other vehicles, so I wanted the most reliable thing that I could buy, especially where when I go to my day job of doing physical therapy, I even drive between towns earlier than 6 in the morning. And sometimes I'm out on the road, out on the highways and the interstates before the snow plows. So I've driven through some pretty gnarly conditions, and honestly, I just don't want to have to worry about my vehicle. If it breaks down, if something happens to it, if it can't physically drive the dozens of miles I have to go each day for the distances I typically do with my day job, then what's the point? I need a vehicle that can do those things. I think this with those tires can, but having a spare tire in the back, I don't have to worry about punctures or pops because I know I'm covered there. Having such a reliable engine, getting good MPG, it just really gives me a lot of peace of mind, and that's something I appreciate. But I do realize that I might be a little more sensitive to that than the average person. I've had an engine blow up. I've had 2 transmissions go out, and in fact, the Trans Am and the Miata both had their transmissions fail. One was an auto, one was a manual. I just have had that sort of luck with vehicles at different times. So that's why I typically drive brand new vehicles. And because I am scarred from those experiences, the Toyota RAV4 seemed to be the most reliable vehicle. And right now, while I have the opportunity to drive a lot of crazy cool cars on my channel, a lot of vehicles that I get to borrow for a while and then give back, it is nice to always come home to such a reliable, stable vehicle, and the RAV4 has certainly been that for me. In 6 months and 9,000 miles, I haven't had a single hiccup with it, and that's kind of the plan, the trajectory that I continue to experience from a vehicle like this. Especially knowing what the powertrain is, knowing how the electronic CVT works with planetary gears, and the dual port injection D4S engine, this just feels like such a reliable platform. Its all-wheel drive might not be the best, it might not have the most ground clearance or the most cargo capacity, but overall, this is a very good vehicle for my current needs. Additionally, driving the hybrid compared to the non-hybrid, I know that my daily commute, a lot of highway and interstate, 65 to 80 miles an hour, is not the ideal driving conditions for a hybrid system to actually maximize its MPG, which I have been able to get well over 40 around town, and I usually average around 35 to 36 with all my highway and 80-mile-per-hour interstate driving. But I'm pretty frugal. I don't like to spend a lot of money. I do pay for vehicles in full basically every time I buy one, so I'm never paying for interest, I'm never paying for anything unnecessary, and I never usually get the most loaded out trim level. I get the one that I can live with for a while, the one that's going to make me happy but isn't exactly the highest trim level. That's not what I'm interested in. And this SE Hybrid is a pretty good one, but also just getting 35 miles per gallon, like even when I filled up a little bit earlier today until now, it is pretty cool how rewarding that feels to not always feel like you're being nickeled and dimed at the gas pump. Even though gas mileage really isn't that big of a cost compared to tens of thousands of dollars in a vehicle, you might be spending $10 more a week. That's only $520 a year. So it's like you're really not spending or saving that much more, between 26 mpg and 36 mpg, but it just feels psychologically like it's a nice win, and I get to experience that every week, and that's pretty cool. And between getting about 35 to 40 miles per gallon and having this really reliable powertrain with dual port injection, the planetary CVT, all that stuff, for me as a car enthusiast, someone who really likes to drive, of course, I like to drive cool, powerful, fun vehicles, sleepers, cool trucks, low sports cars that handle really well, all that type of stuff. But honestly, more than anything, I just like to be on the road. I just like to be driving 60 miles an hour through the country, listening to good music. I just like to be having a nice, relaxed time, and having a good MPG setup, having a really reliable motor and powertrain like this, it means I don't really feel bad about driving it a lot. So having put about 9,000 miles on it now, I don't drive nearly as much as I used to, but I still feel like I could just easily take this across the country, like it could go anywhere, do anything, and it's never going to have a mechanical failure. At least mentally, in my mind, that's what I'm telling myself, compared to a lot of the other forums where you read about so many problems from the 1 to 3% of people who actually experience the issue. It feels like those issues are everywhere, but not on this platform. This feels absolutely solid. But I do recommend you potentially consider getting your oil changed more often than every 10,000 miles like Toyota suggests. If for no other reason, just to check under the hood, to look at your fluids, to check your reservoirs, to make sure everything looks good. I did have my first Toyota Care oil change done at 8,000 miles. I'll probably have the next one when this is at 15,000 miles, and then I'll just switch over to doing it myself every 5,000 miles afterwards. So I'm not going to wait till 10,000 miles. I just think that Toyota does that to show a lower cost of ownership, but I don't think that that is necessarily the healthiest thing to do for your engine, especially if you go, a long time between miles, if you don't drive a whole lot at all, especially if you don't drive a whole lot all at once and those miles come slowly. I'm still a firm believer of every 5,000 or 6 months, whatever comes first. So overall, I am pretty pleased with my end of the 5th generation Toyota RAV4, but I'm also pretty happy and excited for what the new generation is going to look like. I think Toyota did a lot of things well. I honestly don't think they really did anything that has surprised us. Of course, the front fascia is a little bit more aggressive. The rear looks pretty cool. It doesn't look poorly designed, but the side profile is about the same. The windows are about the same. The doors are probably going to open about the same. And unfortunately, the buttons for the HVAC are going to the screen. But at least it is a pretty good screen. And there are a few new trim levels of the Toyota RAV4, including the GR, which that is something I think could be controversial about this platform. I hope it feels more like an actual GR, like a bespoke performance platform, than what the Mustang Mach-E feels like from Ford, where they're just reusing a name because it's iconic and cool, but not because the vehicle represents that. I do think this vehicle needs a little bit more life, a little bit more soul for it to wear a GR badge, and hopefully the plug-in hybrid EV does resemble that. So personally, I think until I drive the new one and decide for myself if it actually feels any better, I'm going to hold on to this one for a little bit longer. But currently, if I had to buy the new one, I would probably go with the GR, just because I haven't yet owned or experienced a plug-in hybrid. I don't necessarily think that it'll be worth, the time and money for me to own one, but I like experiences. I like trading out vehicles to, to learn, to feel new things, and I haven't had a hybrid before this one. I personally wouldn't want to go back to a non-hybrid after owning this, and I'm kind of curious to see what the plug-in hybrid EV feels like because I haven't actually driven one of those yet. So overall, I've had a good experience with my RAV4. I honestly don't regret it. I think it's been a good purchase. It's fun to drive for the most part, but also, again, it's fun for me because it gets good MPG and it's reliable, and those are things that I really value, especially right now while I don't have a second car or a project car to work on and as kind of a backup vehicle. But what are your thoughts? Do you like the new generation? Are you happy about it? Sad about it? Do you feel indifferent? I'd love to know. Are you disappointed that Toyota did follow the same suit as the Camry? And, they did increase the horsepower to make up for the weight, but they also dropped the gas-only engine. So you can only buy these as a hybrid EV or plug-in EV. So it will be interesting to see what those ones are like. It will be interesting to see what the prices are, but I don't think that Toyota really surprised us with anything that they haven't already foreshadowed in the past. The new front fascia, it looks bold, it looks aggressive. The interior looks more truck-like, similar to the truck platform where everything is a little bit more squared off. And I do think that personally, overall, it looks pretty good, at least decent in video and decent in picture, which is a good thing because not all vehicles, when they're first rendered, actually look good online. So I think this one actually is pretty decent. But what are your thoughts? Again, comment below. And if you got anything out of this random update video, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I hope to see you on the next one. See ya.